I'm here to give you a presentation about risk, culture, and endeavor, and how those things come together. I'll explain in just a moment. But I'm going to need some help. First, I'll deal with a question I'm often asked at the start of a presentation, actually at the end. Somebody comes up to me and says, have you considered a future in politics? And I say to them, no. And they say, why? I've got two very good reasons. First of those is anyone who came to my wedding can tell you that I can't dance. And the second is my understanding of local languages. If you're speaking to me in a local language, then I start to nod at you. I'm not saying I agree with you. I'm saying I don't know what you just said to me. Back to that. Anybody who's been to the filming of a live TV show will usually see somebody standing off stage and they're holding one of these. It's a paddle. It's like a prompt. It tells you what to do next. I'll be holding it myself today. But basically, when it says clap, you're due to clap. And when it says yes, I need you to say, just say yes, and then you go along with it, okay? Shall we try it out? Okay? Thank you very much. Okay, so the presentation works like this. It's told in a series of stories, and the first of those begins when I was 16 years old. At the time, I desperately wanted to be a pilot, so I got my father to introduce me to a friend of his, a retired pilot, Air Force General. And I asked him, how did you become a pilot? And he said to me, by accident. I said, how do you become a pilot by accident? And he says, actually, I was a soldier, and I was called into a meeting, turned the corner, and the president was sitting there, 1967. And says to him, I've committed that 5 Zambians will be flying in an air display this time next year. You're one of the 5 who's been chosen. If you agree, you go to Yugoslavia in the morning and come back a year from now as a pilot. Do you agree? And he just said, yes, sir. Now, I compare that to where we are today as a country, where I open the papers, where a young person will be looking for a job. And it says, bank teller wanted, 5 years experience. I look at that and say that these people have no endeavor. Absolutely no endeavor. They're shutting the door on young people. Do you agree with me? Yes. Okay, so I tracked it back to something that I call the chief system. It's over there, okay? Now it works like this. If I have a sheet of paper with me here, and it starts out flat, okay? If I were to roll it, after I'm done rolling it, even when I let go of it, it doesn't want to become flat anymore. And that describes the impact of culture in your life. Now, our parents' generation came from villages to town about 50 years ago, and they brought with them this structure here that they used to administer villages, okay? At the very top is a chief, okay? And a chief reigns supreme, a chief reigns for life. Don't look him in the eye, you kneel in front of him. He's a very wise man, okay? And below the chief, you have the kapaso. The kapaso is very important because they control access to the chief. Below them, you have the indunas. Okay? Indunas are meant to be advisors to the chief, but their actions suggest something else. They're usually advisors to themselves. Underneath them, you have the wealthy peasants. Okay? The wealthy peasants are battling among themselves because they aspire to become indunas. Indunas aspire to become chiefs. Then you have the people. Okay? So look at our companies today. Skip forward 50 years. The chief is now known as the chief executive officer. Okay? The kapaso is now known as a PA. The indunas, absolutely, join me if you can. The wealthy peasants. So let's go back. The indunas are now known as directors. The wealthy peasants are known as managers. And you have the people who's everybody else. Do you agree with me? Okay, let's move forward. So how does this impact our organizations? We say to you, okay, I had a colleague from Germany. He lived here for 2 years. And when he was leaving, he said to me, you know what? Zambians and Germans are exactly the same, but for one thing. And I said, what? He says to me, failure. The way that you deal with failure. I said, okay, explain it to me. Then he said 3 letters, B-E-R. And I'll get back to this one in a moment. But I often hear Zambians say strange things like, Zambians are terrible contractors. And Chinese are good at building. The Turkish are good at making blocks. And I have 2 problems with that. The first is that it begins to constrain the number of things that you can do just because you're a Zambian. And the second thing is that it's a lie. I looked up BER, okay? And BER is an airport in Germany. Berlin-Brandenburg Airport. You can look up my Twitter handle later and have a look for it. But basically, BER is a disastrous project in the home of the master builders, the Germans. This project was 15 years in planning, 10 years in construction. It's been set back 3 times. The overspend on BER is equivalent to half of Zambia's national debt, but no one ever talks about it, okay? What they did instead is that they looked into the problem. Business schools throughout Germany did research, and they found the project manager was delinquent, the contractors were the wrong ones, they were overcommitted, and they wrote 100-page documents on what went wrong, okay? Now I want you to compare that to Zambia. We had an airline here that flew from London to New York, Rome, Amsterdam, and Frankfurt, and it closed. I don't know why. By show of hands, does anybody know why Zambia Airways closed? No idea. You just hear vague statements like, oh, they gave away too many tickets, oh, they were performing poorly, etc. But what's really taking place is the chief system. The Induna who was charged with that project wanted to be close enough so that if it works out, he can say, I caused this success is attributable to me, but if it fails, I didn't know this was going on, I'm going to fire that chap. Do you agree with me? Okay, so, geniuses. We'll move on to the next point. So I'm saying that if you're going to move this country forward, you need to thoroughly understand what went wrong and how we're going to fix it the next time round, okay? So, let's talk about geniuses. If you look carefully at this structure, there's no place for a genius. See, a genius enters as one of the people, but his brilliance, his endeavor will push him right up the chain very quickly. So the Indunas don't like him, and the wealthy peasants don't like him either. I encountered a genius 2 years ago. He sent me an email. I opened it, and he said, I'm looking for a job. So I opened it, and it had the best CV I've ever seen. His name is Anissa Lewia. He's in the crowd today somewhere. So basically, he got the highest O-level results in Western Province. I think he got 8 ones, and he was the highest O-level results in Western Province. He got a $250,000 scholarship to study in the US. In his second year, he was selected as an intern by General Electric and sent to Nairobi to work on strategic planning. In his third year, he did it again and was sent to Lusaka. In his fourth year, he was an exchange student and graduated with a distinction in economics and maths. Came back home, couldn't find a job. So I was left wondering, what's the problem here? This guy must be a drunk. I've got to interview him. Interviewed him, and he was absolutely brilliant, and I worked out, this is a genius. But then I worked out, this is a common issue. A year ago, through no brilliance of my own, I was invited to a cocktail party for a lady named Lucy Sichone. Lucy Sichone was the first Zambian woman to receive the Rhodes Scholarship, which is the most prestigious scholarship in the world at Oxford University. Last year, they were celebrating her life, and they said she was the first woman to ever have her poster mounted at Rhodes House as a brilliant thinker. She's been recognized as a great thinker to emerge from Africa, one of the greatest ever. But in her own hometown, I bet nobody has heard of her. Has anybody heard of her? She's not really as notable and as famous as she could have been. And there are more of them. Has anyone here heard of a man called Nkakaputa? There's a Zambian man from Northern Province who was a minister of immigration in Canada. It's a bizarre story. You'll have to look up my Twitter handle to know more about it. But basically, he and others like him had the power to overturn the entire structure. So they were ejected from it from the very beginning, in the same way that my own little genius couldn't find a job simply because he was so great. If we're going to move Zambia forward, we need to embrace geniuses, take advantage of them, use their skills. Do you agree with me? Yes. Okay. Now, every time, I've noticed the chief system in action again. Every time somebody proposes something that is bold and ambitious, a chief steps to the front or an Induna and says, this can't be done. This is a waste of time. And the way that they do it is quite clever. They often pick up unrelated items within your explanation, join them together and make you look ridiculous. So I'll give an example of this. In 1984, Zambia was on its knees financially. Kenneth Kaunda came up with a plan. He said, we're going to grow huge plantations of sugarcane, convert it into biodiesel, and reduce our dependence on oil. People listened to the presentation, and the next day, the Indunas were already at work. They picked up 2 unrelated issues. They said, Kenneth Kaunda in his speech said that sugarcane is a form of grass. It can grow anywhere. Therefore, Kenneth Kaunda would like to convert grass into oil. He is insane. Out of character, he backed down on the project, and he didn't do it. Had he followed through at that time, we wouldn't be in Zambia as it is today. Instead of hearing about Mauritius, about Rwanda, and about Kenya, they would have been hearing about Zambia. For some reason, he just stopped, and he backed off. It was the ridicule. 5 years ago, the same thing happened. I was sitting in government complex, and a man came and said, we need an electric train that's going to run from Livingston to Copperbelt. He gave a brilliant presentation. I left there saying, wow, when they implement this project, Zambia will be changed forever. By morning, the Indunas were working. Remember, they're more concerned with themselves and where they fit in the structure. And they know that if a bold new project comes into play, they may no longer be Indunas. This other person will take charge. So what happened was, during the man's presentation, he said, in the center of Lusaka, the railway company owns 300 meters of the CBD. Rather than pass the train over it, we ought to run it underground and develop the land above. So the Indunas picked up two unrelated issues and said, this man would like to build an underground train from Livingston to Copperbelt. Therefore, he is insane. I've worked out that the only way to deal with these people, because you can't reason with them, they're not reasoning with you. The only way to deal with them is to confront them like bullies and say to them, I don't care that you don't approve, I'm going to do it anyway, and move forward. Do you agree with me? Yes. Now, despite knowing all this, I recently discovered that I too am a chief. How? Okay, so we have two ladies who work with us at home. One of them is named Annette, and she's worked with us for 4 years. So I noticed there was a problem. I knew there was a problem from the beginning. I would open the door at lunch, and Annette would turn off the TV or turn off the radio, and she works in silence. Now, she felt uncomfortable because I was there, and I felt uncomfortable, but neither of us was saying anything, so we kind of just went along with it. This went on for a long time. Then one day, I was going for a business trip in Joburg, and I said to her, Annette, I need you to pack those trousers, that shirt, and that suit. I left the house. When I came back, I picked up the things and I left. For some reason, I didn't unpack my bag when I got to Joburg. Next morning, 1 hour to my meeting, I unwrapped the suit and find a large ketchup stain around the groin. And I was furious. I just said, oh my goodness, I'm going to fire that chap. Looked in the mirror and realized you are now a chief. You have inaugurated yourself a chief. So when I got home, I said, rather than fire her, I need to deal with the issue. What's the issue? We don't know each other, we don't communicate, so now I'm a chief at the top and she's one of the people. We lack the communication. So I went up to her and realized she's worked here for 4 years, I don't even know her surname, So I said, fine. Annette, my name is Mafipe, and she looked at me like I was crazy. I said, how am I gonna deal with this? She looked at me, I'm Mafipe, and she says, I'm Annette. She says, Annette who? Annette Banda. I said, thank you. The next day, nothing kind of happened. I opened the door, she rushed to turn off the TV, I said, leave that alone. She kind of froze there and she left it alone. I said, okay, good, we're making progress. This went on for a number of months. And one day I was leaving to go back to work and she says to me, Mafipe, a number of your suits are dirty. If you give me the money, I'll take them to the dry cleaners. Okay, I'm closing now. I'm closing. So, remember I talked to you about the paper. Even as I was preparing for this presentation, I found that the voices of the Indunas were acting on me. The chief system doesn't just exist in workplaces, it's even in your head. So what happened was, as I was going along, I said to myself, what if I get there and they don't like the presentation? What if they don't understand it? What if they don't get it? What if I get there and like the guy from last year, I forget my words? And I had to say to myself, what? No, 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 I don't care. If you don't approve, I'm going to do it anyway. If we're going to lead the Zambian revival, it's going to be you and it's going to be me. Identify the chief in yourself, destroy the chief in yourself. Thank you very much. God bless Zambia.